Now on to other news. The two men convicted of executing 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee will be locked up behind bars for decades. Dwight Boone Doty is a convicted triggerman. He was sentenced to 90 years. His accomplice, Corey Morgan, sentenced to 65.
The jury found Pierre Stokes guilty of attempted murder and aggravated battery. Prosecutors say Stokes shot 3 people to avenge his own son's death.
This is Jeremiah Farmer, who claims he was forced to beat the Grammy winner. Kelly was asleep in his cell at Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center last Wednesday when he was attacked.
Investigators say Pierre Robinson shot and 23-year-old Glenn Houston Jr. in 2014 to keep his position in the Evans Mob street gang.
Coroners now identified the 3 women who died in that shooting in Beverly Crest. They're 33-year-old Iyana Hutton of Chicago, 29-year-old Nenah Davis from Bolingbrook, Illinois, and 26-year-old Destiny Sims of Buckeye, Arizona. 4 other people are still hospitalized, 2 critical after the shooting at the short-term rental property.
Thomas Cocorales is a sex offender, a convicted killer, linked to one of the most terrifying times in Chicago history.
Everybody thinks I'm a monster.
Chicago's streets have long been haunted by gang violence, but behind the headlines are real lives lost, families shattered, and communities forever scarred. From calculated ambushes in Los Angeles tied to Windy City gangs, to heart-wrenching stories like the execution of 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee. The brutality is as shocking as it is tragic. This documentary takes you deep inside some of the most notorious gangland deletions, ambushes, and criminal legacies tied to factions like the Gangster Disciples, Black P Stones, Latin Kings, and more, shedding light on the chaos, the deletions, and the devastating consequences of a war waged in Chicago's shadows.
If you could take a look, there's the crime scene tape up, and as investigators are inside that line, they're trying to take a look at what happened. This happened around 2:30 this morning here on the 2700 block of Ellison Drive. When first responders arrived, they found that 2 men and another woman were dead. 4 others were wounded and taken to the hospital in critical condition.
Arrests have been made in an ambush-style shooting in Beverly Crest. 3 women were gunned down in January while sitting in a car outside a rented home. And police believe there is a connection to another shooting in North Hollywood.
Police say they can't talk about the motive in the shootings, but say that they're associated with events that happened in Chicago. Both the victims and the suspects were originally from the Chicago area. The shooting deaths of 3 women in a January attack in Beverly Crest and a man in North Hollywood in December were all perpetrated by gang members from Chicago. The alleged shooters have been identified as 28-year-old Darius Stanford, 28-year-old Dejon Tompkins, and 23-year-old Dante Williams.
In January 2023, a shocking ambush in the upscale Beverly Crest neighborhood of Los Angeles claimed the lives of 3 women from the Chicago area. The victims had traveled to Los Angeles reportedly to support a local rap artist and were sitting inside a parked SUV after a night of bowling when they were targeted in a calculated, ambush-style shooting. All 3 women were deleted at the scene. In the weeks that followed, authorities arrested 3 suspects, all with ties to Chicago street gangs. Darius Stanford, Dante Williams, and Dejon Tompkins were apprehended in Illinois, Indiana, and New York. Prosecutors alleged the attack was gang-related. Dejon Tompkins faces 4 counts of deletion, including 1 count linked to a separate December 2022 homicide in Chicago, as well as 6 counts of attempted deletion. Stanford and Williams each face 3 counts of deletion and 6 counts of attempted deletion related to the Beverly Crest slayings. All 3 are also charged with special circumstance firearm enhancements, making them eligible for life without parole if convicted.
Now on to other news. The 2 men convicted of executing 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee will be locked up behind bars for decades. Dwight Boone Doty is a convicted triggerman. He was sentenced to 90 years. His accomplice, Corey Morgan, sentenced to 65. Prosecutors say in 2015 they lured Tyshawn Lee into an alley and shot him in order to get at his dad. They said he belonged to a gang that had shot Morgan's mom and brother. After Tyshawn were led away in handcuffs.
During the trial, it was revealed that Doty's DNA was found on a basketball that was located feet from 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee's body and also inside an SUV that was used as a getaway car. There were also powerful recordings from a jailhouse informant that were played for the jury. Doty could be heard bragging about the 9-year-old and even laughing.
Accused of driving the getaway car in the alleged revenge of a 9-year-old boy pleads guilty. Yesterday, Kevin Edwards told a judge he lured the child into an alley by promising him a juice box. He admitted that he did that so another man could kill the child. Edwards was sentenced to 25 years in prison and is one of 3 men charged.
In one of Chicago's most shocking and heartbreaking crimes, 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee was lured into an alleyway and executed at point-blank range in November 2015. The deletion took place in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood on the city's south side and sent waves of grief and outrage across the nation. 2 men, Dwight Boone Doty and Corey Morgan, were later convicted for Tyshawn's murder. Both were identified as members of the Bang Bang Gang Terror Dome faction of the Black P Stones, a notorious street gang. According to Cook County prosecutors, the motive behind the deletion was gang retaliation. Boone Doty and Morgan believed that Tyshawn's father, who was associated with a rival Black Disciples faction, had played a role in the earlier deletion of Morgan's brother. Determined to exact revenge, the men devised a horrific plan. They approached Tyshawn while he was on his way to play basketball at a local park. Under false pretenses, they coaxed him into a nearby alley. There, Boone Doty carried out the execution while Morgan waited in a getaway vehicle nearby. In 2019, separate juries found both men guilty of first-degree deletion. Boone Doty received a 90-year prison sentence with no possibility of parole, while Morgan was sentenced to 65 years behind bars. Prosecutors described the crime as mind-numbing, debilitating, senseless violence, an execution that left a family shattered and a city stunned. Tyshawn Lee's deletion remains a tragic symbol of how deeply gang violence can scar communities, especially when the most innocent lives are caught in the crossfire.
A vicious cycle of gun violence in Chicago. Tyshawn Lee's father is convicted on gun charges. Pierre Stokes was found guilty yesterday of flashing a gun at a woman in 2014. The next year, Stokes was apparently part of a shooting that killed a rival gang member's brother. Just last week, 2 members of that gang were convicted of 9-year-old Tyshawn out of revenge. But after Tyshawn's death, prosecutors say Stokes went on a revenge spree of his own, shooting 3 people in 2016.
The jury found Pierre Stokes guilty of attempted murder and aggravated battery. Prosecutors say Stokes shot 3 people to avenge his own son's death.
Tyshawn Lee's father, Pierre Stokes, was a high-ranking member of the Gangster Disciples Kill Award, said a group engaged in violent rivalries with the Black P Stones. Detectives believe Tyshawn met his demise due to Stokes' gang ties. Even after his son's death, Stokes remained active in the streets. In 2016, he was charged in a shooting that injured 3 people. Years later, in October 2023, Stokes was convicted of attempted deletion and aggravated battery for a revenge shooting that targeted the girlfriend of one of the guys who committed a violent act against his son, injuring her and 2 relatives. Prosecutors argued the shooting was vigilante justice.
Tonight, an inmate claims he snuck into R. Kelly's jail cell to attack the singer. This is Jeremiah Farmer, who claims he was forced to beat the Grammy winner. Kelly was asleep in his cell at Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center last Wednesday when he was attacked. Farmer, in jail for racketeering conspiracy, lays it all out in this appeal to the 7th Circuit. Farmer writes he was, quote, forced to assault hip-hop and R&B singer R. Kelly in hopes of getting spotlight attention and world news notice to shed light on the government corruption, end quote.
Jeremiah Farmer, a known member of the Latin Kings, was sentenced to life in prison for a 1999 double deletion in Highland, Indiana. Farmer and accomplices beat 2 elderly auto shop owners to death during a gang-motivated attack. In 2020, he was convicted in federal court of racketeering conspiracy tied to the Latin Kings. Farmer gained additional notoriety in 2019 when he assaulted singer R. Kelly in a Chicago jail. Though Kelly was uninjured, the incident drew headlines. Farmer later claimed the attack was a protest against his own incarceration.
Details tonight in the shooting of a Cicero police officer. Officials say a known Chicago street gang member has been arrested. The 19-year-old is facing 2 counts of attempted a police officer. The shooting happened early Saturday morning when 2 undercover officers approached a double-parked car near 35th Street and 61st Court. Someone inside the car opened fire, striking a 29-year-old sergeant in the back.
On December 8, 2024, Cicero police arrested Giovanni Saldivar for allegedly shooting a Cicero police sergeant during an undercover operation. Saldivar, described as a known gang member, opened fire as officers approached a double-parked vehicle. The sergeant was shot in the back but survived. Saldivar was charged with 2 counts of attempted deletion of a peace officer and multiple firearm offenses. He remains held without bond. His specific gang affiliation has not yet been disclosed by authorities.
About Thomas Cocarellis, a member of the notorious 4-man Ripper crew, responsible for sadistic.
Thomas Cocarellis is a sex offender, a convicted linked to one of the most terrifying times in Chicago history.
Everybody thinks I'm a monster.
He and the 3 other members of the Ripper crew terrorized the city and suburbs in the early 80s. They're believed to have as many as 20 women, and torturing them as part of a satanic communion.
They were attacked and mutilated.
Cocarellis confessed and eventually cut a deal, pleading guilty to one of them. He got out of prison after serving just half of his sentence.
I'm much calmer now. I'm nicer, not mean. I just have a bad attitude.
But what he doesn't want to do, ever, he says, is talk to the victims' families.
I don't want to talk to them.
You don't want to talk to them?
No,
There's nothing that you want to say to that family?
No, I just want to say that I feel for them. I feel sorry for them. And I'm praying for them.
I just can't believe he's saying that. I just can't believe it.
Thomas Cocarellis, one of 4 men linked to Chicago's infamous Ripper crew, was convicted of the 1982 torture and deletion of 21-year-old Lorraine Borofsky. The Ripper crew was suspected of abducting, raping, and deleting up to 20 women in the 1980s, often in sadistic, ritualistic ways. Though initially sentenced to life, Cocarellis took a plea deal in 2018 and was released from prison in March 2019 after serving 35 years, half of his 70-year sentence. His release reignited public outrage due to the brutality of his crime.
Has confirmed that Chicago gang member Jones will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Jones was convicted for the 2011 murder of Sharonez Jefferson and has been sentenced to 90 years in prison. Prosecutors allege that Jones fired at a rival gang member that Jefferson was with, and after the gang member fled the scene, he began firing at Jefferson multiple times before running away. Jefferson was 7 months pregnant and did not survive the shooting, but her son did. However, prosecutors say the now 5-year-old remains fully incapacitated with little hope of recovery. Jones remains
Timothy Jones, member of the Rockwell Boys gang, was convicted for the 2011 demise of Chirinez Charlie Jefferson, who was pregnant at the time. Jones was reportedly aiming at a rival, but instead shot Jefferson multiple times at close range. Despite her yelling, "I'm pregnant," she later died at the hospital after giving birth prematurely. In 2016, Jones was sentenced to 90 years in prison. The court emphasized that she was an innocent victim caught in senseless gang violence. On December 27, 2011, Gangster Disciple member Arthur Chaney opened fire on a Church's Chicken restaurant in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, attempting to delete rivals inside. Instead, he killed 2 innocent teens and wounded 5 others. In 2016, Chaney was convicted of 2 counts of deletion and 5 counts of attempt. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 120 years. The judge stated that Chaney didn't care who he hurt, describing the shooting as reckless and heartless.
A federal jury has convicted a Chicago man of committing murder to boost clout in a street gang. This is video released of the alleged incident by the U.S. Attorney's Office, that is. Investigators say Pierre Robinson shot a year-old Glenn Houston Jr. in 2014 to keep his position in the Evans mob street gang.
Pierre Robinson was a known member of the Evans Mob, a violent faction of the Gangster Disciples, also known as GuttaGang or the Hit Squad. In 2014, Robinson fatally shot 23-year-old Glenn Houston Jr. inside a Chicago store, an act prosecutors said was committed to boost his status within the gang. The deletion reflected a broader trend of violent retaliation by Evans mob members, who frequently use social media to brag about shootings and threaten rivals. Robinson was convicted in August 2022 in federal court of deletion in aid of racketeering and firearms offenses. In March 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison. Federal prosecutors noted that Evans mob trafficked drugs and violence, using online platforms as both a recruitment tool and a weapon of intimidation. These stories aren't just tales of violence, they're harsh reminders of the systemic issues plaguing Chicago and cities like it. Every name and face represents more than just a statistic. They reflect the real cost of generational trauma, poverty, and unchecked gang influence. As the cycle of retaliation and despair continues, one thing remains clear. The true victims are often the innocent, and the ripple effects reach far beyond the trigger pull. It's time to confront the reality, not just the headlines.